In this video we want to talk about research in business. Now, some of the material in this video will overlap with material in other videos in the research area. It's wise for you to consult those other videos, make notes from them, and do the same from here and merge the notes to get a fuller and rounder picture. But for the moment, let's concentrate on research in business and see what this class brings out. We'll start with the research rationale. Research is important as a source of knowledge for decision making. That's the most important point to make. Research sheds light on issues, and then better decisions can be made within the business. There are two types of research. One is primary research, which discovers data and analyzes the data. And the second is secondary research, which uses published data and analyzes it. Clearly, primary research gives the business a unique view and is better because the competitors can't get access to that. The competitors can get access to secondary material, which is perhaps published by the government or published by trade associations. So primary research is more important and probably better value for business than secondary research. Secondary research is open to everyone, and the databases may be open for many people to investigate and to look at relationships. Primary research is customized research, research conducted on behalf of the organization on a specific issue. The data collected should be objective and follow a systematic method of procedures. It's important that it is objective. The data collected, if it's subjective, if it's just imagined by the researchers, it's useless. It's biased and it's perhaps not well thought out. Objective research, i.e. research which is follows particular patterns of collection procedures. These patterns, which we would classify as scientific, as we'll discuss later. Scientific in the sense that they are objective. For example, random sampling, which means collecting data from a population and collecting the data so that every element in the population has an equal chance of being selected. Now, it's costly and it's difficult, but the information collected that way is more reliable. It's objective. The people selected for interview or for questionnaires were not picked by the researcher, so they do not reflect the bias of the researcher. They were picked objectively. The systematic approach is referred to as a scientific approach. It's scientific in the sense that, as I said, every element in the population has an equal chance of being selected, and therefore it is a better approach to take. There is less bias. The approach itself looks for generalizations and attempts to understand the fundamental relationships in the data. So, having conducted the research, then the analyst will attempt to find patterns in the data, generalizations. Patterns perhaps recur over and over every time a piece of research is conducted. And if the same patterns are observed over and over and over, then they start to generalize it. They start to say, well, every time something happens, something else happens. Every time. Because every time a piece of research has been conducted in this area, these two go together. So the researcher is looking to generalize and that's important in research. Now, the information for management, well, market pressures force management to make good decisions, and this gives rise to the need for research. Clearly, it depends on how competitive the industry is. If a company has got a unique position and perhaps is the sole supplier of a product, then in effect it's a monopoly and it doesn't have to worry too much about the market and the market conditions. It knows it's the only supplier. But when a company has got competitors supplying similar products or even identical products, then it must try to find some sort of uniqueness, some advantage in the market. And the way to do that is to research the market. Research the market to see what customer needs are and how the product is being received in the market, how customers perceive the product. There is an increasing practice of use of data mining and data warehousing techniques to support management in the decision-making process. Data mining means trying to get access to databases and collecting data from various databases and combining it and refining the data so that it's available to the business, and it provides a basis for decision making. It provides an insight, and you should really look up data mining and data warehousing techniques and understand their significance. I'm not going to get into those topics in this session, but these terms are important and it's important that you understand them. There will be separate videos on these topics later. Data mining, just for a moment, is the collection of data from a wide range of appropriate sources. It looks at various sources and collects data from them, perhaps from databases held within the industry, government databases, academics compile databases. So it's looking at information from a variety of sources and also conducting some research itself and adding to the stock, if you like, the stock of data that the business may access in trying to get an insight into some market position or some market issue. Data warehousing, well, this is the tool, or these are the tools, I should say, and techniques available to analyze the various sources of data. So the warehousing idea is to store the data and then apply techniques and experiment with various techniques to see which one gives the better insight into the data. It may be regression analysis, or it may be some sort of tests of significance, or whatever, some sort of statistical process or some sort of technique for analyzing the data. As I said, I think you should look up data mining and data warehousing and make some notes of those. Access it online and see what you can come up with. But we will have separate videos covering these topics later. Now, research skills. Well, these enable the management to acquire information as an aid to decision making. That's what the research skills do. They help the management to acquire the information, and the information is then used for good decision making. Also undertake sophisticated applied research if necessary. So good research skills can enable management to undertake sophisticated research. Not just collecting some data perhaps locally and working out the average or the mean, but perhaps working out what the moving average is or what sort of smoothing techniques for the data could be used to work out a trend or a pattern. So it enables the management, good research skills enables the management to make sophisticated calculations of the data and turn the data into useful information. The research skills help to formulate a good research design, perhaps a good questionnaire, good pre-testing. The wording is clear, understood, the sequence of the questions is well laid out, and it's administered professionally so that bias is kept to a minimum. And the research should be effective. It should minimize costs. It shouldn't be extravagant, but at the same time it should be sufficiently resourced to bring about appropriate results. Appropriate in the sense that useful results come out of it and the results are suitable for decision making. The research itself should have a budget and should be financed out of a budget, so there is clarity about what resources are available and the expenditure on each item within the budget. Now the types of research, well, there is applied research, or sometimes called action research. For example, market research, talking to customers and trying to determine what the customer's needs are and how they perceive the product at the moment. But market research could also be into suppliers and looking at how the suppliers see the business and what are the suppliers' expectations of the business. Market research doesn't have to be based on the customer, it could be based on the supplier. There could be a competitor analysis, which is a part of strategy, and it's looking at all of the issues associated with the competitors, the number of competitors, the size of the competitors, their patterns of research, the new products they have introduced and are planning to introduce, and looking at sources of information about the competitors. There are many issues involved in this, and it's a very important topic, and again subject to a separate video. There's also applied research into production and innovation, and that's important. It's important to know precisely what the production system is, what is efficient production, looking at the process of innovation and invention. Invention is coming up with a new idea for a new product, and the innovation, the commercialization of the invention, putting the invention into practice and making it available in the marketplace. Next, there's pure research. These are generalizations and formulations. Now, examples of pure research, well, this could be knowledge for knowledge's sake. It's very seldom undertaken in business. Business research is normally to solve a problem or to give an insight into some area which may be used to the advantage of the business. Knowledge for knowledge's sake normally takes place at universities and research institutes that are looking into some fundamental relationship, perhaps in mathematics or in pure science. It's gaining an understanding of some fundamental relationship. As I said, it applies a lot in academic areas and in pure research areas. The people at CERN, the scientists at CERN, for example, are looking at subatomic particles and looking at the properties of those. Now that research may be useful to us in the future, but some would say, well, it's very obscure at the moment. But we want to know about it. We want to know what is the most fundamental particle. So we conduct research, and very expensive research. So really in business we're more interested in applied research, in looking at market research, competitor analysis and production and logistics and so on. Now, the attributes of good research, well, a clear statement that will focus on the research. That's very important. It's very important that any research should contain a statement, a very clear statement of what the research is focused on, so that the reader knows exactly what the issue is right at the start. Now, this is known as a hypothesis, and generally speaking, a hypothesis is a testable statement. It's any statement which can be tested. And we look at the evidence, compare the evidence when we analyze the data or the evidence. When we analyze it, we analyze it and we then compare that with the hypothesis and accept or reject the hypothesis based on the evidence. Again, as I said, this is very much a scientific approach to research. Developing a hypothesis, collecting data, analyzing the data, and then accepting the hypothesis or rejecting the hypothesis. It's important to have a clear research plan so that, again, the reader or the person interested in the research will know exactly what the plan is and how it's going to be executed, how the research is going to be conducted. And a clear methodology and access to appropriate data. It's not just a question of knowing where the raw material, the raw data, I should say, is. It's having a methodology, some method to analyze the data, to collect the data and then analyze it. It must be methodical. If it's not, it's haphazard, and it will not lead to consistent and reliable results. So there must be a clear method in the analysis. And there should be a statement about the analytical skills necessary to derive the information from the data. For example, will it involve sophisticated statistical techniques, or would it instead emphasize, or will it instead emphasize broader approaches? So what exactly are the skills necessary to analyze the data? These should be made clear. And the whole approach should be seen as honest and open. And also, it should indicate the limitations of the research. There may be drawbacks in the research. There may be problems in accessing the data, or there may be problems in analyzing the data because of the nature of the data. Perhaps if customers' opinions about the product are sought, their opinions may be attitudinal. They may range from I don't like the product to I like the product very much. Well, how is that going to be analyzed? How are statements like those going to be analyzed? How are they going to be added together and averages or deviations worked out? It's complicated. The research should also have ethical approval. The people, the respondents who are going to be contacted, these people should be aware that they are being researched, their opinions are being sought, and their opinions may be used and combined into aggregates and used for decision making subsequently. But it's important that the respondents are aware of the research and understand what the research will be used for, and that they agree to this. The work should adequately address the hypothesis or question. It's not just a question of having the hypothesis, but the work should adequately address the hypothesis. The work should revolve around the hypothesis. The hypothesis is the testable question, as I said earlier, and all of the research work should be focused in on trying to address that hypothesis. The outcomes should be clearly presented. When the research is conducted, the outcome of the research should be clearly presented and easily understood. It should be presented in a manner which makes it easily understood by the reader. So the outcome should be clear, and the limitations of the research should also be emphasized. That it found a certain relationship, however, this was on the assumption that something applied. Well, those assumptions should be made explicit, so the reader knows the limitations of the work. Now, business research and decision making. Well, first of all, identify the problem to be solved. That is, it's logical that business research should start with a problem to be solved. Then, having decided on the problem, identify the tools to be used. What sort of research is going to be conducted? Is it going to be random sampling? Is it going to be focus group, questionnaire? How exactly will the research be conducted? Clearly state the solution, the outcome from the research. It's important that having conducted the research and analysed the data, that there is a clear solution or outcome from the research. And given it's a business situation, recommend the solution to the management for implementation. Make recommendations of the outcome of the research and offer these to the management for consideration, and if the management agree, it should be implemented. Now, the determinants of business research. Well, determine the available time for the research and program the research to meet the time constraint. So research should not be open-ended. There should be a time scale, perhaps a Gantt chart stating the research will start on a certain date and end on a certain date, and in between various processes will be sequenced and scheduled. So there is certainty about the start date and the finish date for the research. And set out a research budget, as I said earlier, to ensure that the business plan can be achieved within its budget. It's important that the research should be budgeted and everyone knows what the budget is, so that the researchers themselves will stay within budget. That's what's agreed, and it makes financial sense. Make sure that the data is available for the research and that the research question can be resolved. Common sense at the start. When research is about to be undertaken, just ask, can the research be done? Can this question be answered? Some questions perhaps can't be answered. So only ask questions that can be answered, and that research can shed light onto the questions and can indicate solutions to the problems. Finally, make sure that the likely benefit arising from the research exceeds the cost. It's an obvious thing to say, given we're dealing with business, but the benefits of the research should exceed the cost of the research. Clearly, if the cost of the research is more than the benefits, don't do it. So the benefits should exceed the costs, in which case it's a good idea to undertake the research. Now, that's all we're going to deal with in the context of research in business in this session. It significantly overlaps with other classes on research and applied research. So please look at the other classes as well. Make your own notes, wind the video forwards and backwards and so on. Do some research, perhaps online, and pad out your notes and make them clear. But that's all we're going to do for the moment, so I'm going to say thank you for watching.